Uh, okay. We're going to spend the first half hour from 8:45 to 9:15 or 8:50 to 9:15 on one Torah, a Hasidic Torah, and then we're going to do the second half hour a different Hasidic Torah. We're going to try to go through two Torahs this morning. There'll be time for us to make comments about each of the Torahs after we finish learning the Torah, and we'll leave those comments to like 5 or so minutes, 5 or 6, 7 minutes. So I'm hoping we'll learn two different Torahs together in a Hasidic manner. And also, just so you know, it wasn't so easy to print everything this morning. Otherwise, we would have had a completely different shiur, different class. But we had some printing situations this week. So here we are. Stay there. Okay. Whenever you're ready, Caroline, we're ready. Okay. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Sheikh Shalom Utzrosa V'Tzivanu Asod V'Divei Torah. Amen. So on the sheet in that you have in front of you, there's we're going to start with a later part of the Torah portion this morning, and then make our way in the second half hour into the beginning of the parsha. This Torah comes from a Rebbe. Caroline, I think I sent it to your email, so if you have it, that would be great. If you could put it up on the screen. Thank you so much. This teaching comes from the school of the Ishbitzer, Mordechai Yosef Lehner of Ishbitz. In the 18th century, was a great Hasidic master who was a student of Simcha Bunim of Pshist and of the Kotzker Rebbe before he broke away and started his own lineage, which is a very often quoted in circles, like in the renewal circles and Shlomo Carlebach circles and in other circles. He's famous for his teachings on determinism and on free will, on the tension between that which is seen by God and that which is known by God and that which is available to us in the arena of our agency, the arena of our own free will. He's a very, very deep thinker. In fact, that's the name of his book, Me'ashiloach, the waters of Shiloach, the famous waters that were drawn near the temple and known for their depth. His Rebbe said about him that all of my students are tzaddikim, are righteous, but only the Mei Shiloach, only Mordechai Yosef is as deep as the waters of Shiloach. Hence the name of his work, his famous work, and so on. It's a school of his son of Yaakov of Ishbitz, and then his grandson Gershon Henach of Radzin became some of the deepest thinkers in the Hasidic lineage. And so we're going to be looking at a Torah that he gave over that became synonymous, actually, one of the Torahs that became quite identified with him in his school. And you'll see why in a moment. It's based on this week's Torah portion where we're introduced to the two of the matriarchs, Leah and Rachel, Leah and Rachel. And the way that Torah introduces them is that that they're introduced as the Gedolah, Leah, and the Ketana, Rachel. Shem HaGedolah, Leah, the name of the older one. Shem HaGedolah, the name of the Gedolah is Leah. Gedolah here means older. And the Shem HaKetana, and the name of the smaller one, but here means the younger one, right? There are other words for each of those descriptors, right? For older and younger, but here it's the Gedolah and the Ketana is Rachel. Okay, so the name of each of them, right? Okay, we're going to look at names. That's what this piece is all about, names. Okay, and I need okay, see, 8:51. Okay, we have 25 minutes. Okay, you ready? We're ready to go? Start your engines. Isa Midrash. It says in the Midrash, Kohelet Rabbah, part of the Midrashic corpus. You'll have the English. The second Torah this morning won't have English, but we'll go slowly. Shlosha Shemos Yesh LaAdam. Let's A human being gets three names. Three names. Echad ma shekaru lo avi v'imo. The first one is the one that your mom and your dad give you, or your parents, or your loved ones, or whatever, how you got the name, right? Someone gave it to you. The echad ma shekarim lo b'nei adam. Then there's a name that people call you. Maybe like a name by which you're recognized by other people, let's say. What do they call you? There's what your parents call you, and then what people call you. We'll get into what that means. What does that mean exactly? Don't people call you what your parents called you? A nickname. We'll see. He talks about it. Okay. Ve'echad ma shekana la'atzmo. And one name is a name that you acquire. The word kana here is to acquire. It's an acquisition. You buy for yourself, or that you work for yourself, or the one that you acquire on your own. Those are the three names. And this is the Midrash, okay? That's up to that point. He's quoting an earlier source. Yeah? Dvar, are you with us?
Yeah.
Good to see you. The week of. It's the Shabbos before.
My nickname was, people always call me Davash.
Ooh. All right, so we're already in okay, so you can begin percolating on this, because what's the name that I have? My parents gave me the name that people called me, and maybe the name that I acquired for myself. Let's see what the Ishbitzer says, and then we'll open it up, okay? Ura Inyan, what's the explanation of this matter is as follows. Mashik Porinlo Aviva Imo, what does parents say? What does parents give you? What your parents give you? Hainu means Mashinikar B'tzuras Avlad Niyad. Yishu Nolad. Ma Yeh Chacham or Tipesh Otzel or Zariz Uchidome. Says he completely transfigures this. Like we're thinking, he means like the name that you got. Like I'm David, Alan, yes, Amy. No, it's not what I mean. I mean it's more. I mean more. I think the Midrash means more than that. He says there is. He's talking about your nature. There's a nature that from the time that you're in. Now again, excuse his assumptions about biology or his assumptions about what we know about children and genetics and so on, and kind of what's built into the package. So he says that from the time that you're already in your mother's womb, there's a sense of what your nature is. Are you going to be a smart person? Are you going to be not so smart? Are you going to be lazy? Kind of almost a deterministic quality to it. Like you have no choice, right? This is who you are. Now we can hear in this whatever you want to hear in this, but there's a quality here of, as he says, Kibadoris Arishonim Haisazos HaChachma Mifureshes Ba'inekol Shayu Makirim B'Parts of Avlad Mashayu Midos Tiv'o. Right? He says that in earlier generations you could look at the face of the child and say, what is going to be the nature of this child? What are going to be the qualities or the characteristics in their nature? Oh, in their nature. Okay? So this is what Lavan knew the nature of his daughters, and he gave each of them a name according to their natural predisposition. And he's go on to say what their natural predispositions were. Shem Rachel Moresh Ochezes Kina v'Nitzachon Beliba ve'ena motzi'a b'sfasea. This is amazing. He says that Rachel, the quality of Rachel that her father apparently knew, it shows that she was holding jealousy and victory or competition in her heart, but wouldn't say it outside. She would not externalize it. She wouldn't vocalize it. She wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm jealous," or it would just be something that she held within. She muted that quality of herself. As it says in Isaiah, there's a verse in Isaiah, "Uchirachel lifnei gozezeh ne'elama." In chapter 53 of the verse of Isaiah's visions, it says like a Rachel is like a lamb. Rachel is like a sheep. that when it's being shorn is quiet, right? Right? That Leah is silent before those who are shearing it. Rachel's name speaks to a quiet, right? By the way, this is not the only interpretation of that, of the fact that Rachel is compared to a lamb or sheep or it's quiet. But the Hasidic master here is trying to speak to a quality that apparently Lavan, why would Lavan know this? Let's just put that on the side. Every parent maybe knows, like there's a quality of silence in her that is a silencing of a lamb. And that the silence of this lamb is the silence of her jealousy, right, that she keeps hidden within, that she's competitive. And that she's named, this is her teva, this is the first name, the name that her father gave her, her mother, father, whatever. Lavan here's a father, but whatever. Now, he can't leave Rachel in such a, I mean, Rachel doesn't look good in this rendering, right? But you'll see he'll shine Rachel up a little bit, watch. But what does it mean? Haisa kin asa l'shem shamayim. Her jealousy, though, was a jealousy that was l'shem shamayim for God's sake. It says later on that when Rachel was not able to have children and her sister Leah was having children, she was jealous of her sister. Vatikanei Rachel ba'achosa. V'shem Leah, right? So how is that l'shem shamayim? So it was like her jealousy was for the sake of Achosa, which is usually her sister here means Rachel, but it can also mean in Kabbalah for the Shekhinah, for God. On behalf of God, her jealousy was that I want to have a child to bring into the world, right? And so he's kind of rendering it that way. Let's just put that on the side. But he's trying to use an example here based on the verse. That is, that there was something in Rachel that was like her name is an aspect of who she was. Okay. Now Leah, V'shem Leah, Ilashon Nil'ah. What is Nil'ah? Right? Nil'ah means like exhausted or, we'll see in a second. Shem Leah, Ilashon Nil'ah is a tamid Nil'ah v'tzme'ah. It's like exhausted but also panting. She's thirsty. Li'yeshu'os Hashem Yisbarach. There's something about Leah's name, which her parents apparently knew, that her soul was a kind of a thirsting soul for God's salvation. Right? Okay, so we stop there. He's trying to prove from this that Leah and Rachel both had a quality in their names that was speaking to their nature. Let's go a little bit further, and then we'll come back, and then we'll open it up. Okay?
Does the name become because of the nature, or is it the other way around?
He's saying that the name is her nature. In other words, it is a descriptor of a pre-existing nature. And the parents have the ability to look at the child and say, this is who you are. Now, it's not all of who you are, because we'll see in a second, there's the second name you get, which is the name that people call you, and then the name that you acquire for yourself.
All fathers able to see that revelation? And all fathers able to extract?
Not all fathers, but all parents. According to the tradition, parents have like I'll tell you personally that when you start thinking about a name from the time that you realize that you're pregnant, and I remember I was very clear on the name that I wanted, but my Rebbe said you can't name your child until you hold your child. Mm-hmm. So I remember Rav Zalman saying to us, like we already knew we wanted to call our first son Bear, and he said you can't know until you hold the child, and then you have to see if it's true. So there's a quality here of that we kind of bracket whether or not Rachel and Leah, the way he's trying to squeeze in their nature from their name, which is based on the Kabbalah, by the way. But still, like his point is a simple point in that way. All right, let's look at the second name, and then we'll open it up for all of you. Like we'll get inside. Okay. The second name is the name that people call you. Hashem, Inyan Hashem shikorin lo b'nei Adam, Hainu, mashero'in asakav div'o b'ma hu mishtadel. This is the part of the teaching that he gives the least ink to. The name that others call you is basically based on what you do in your life. Like what do you preoccupy yourself with? Like what do you spend your time on? Like, are you learning? Are you an athlete? Are you this? Are you a dancer? Like that's, it's Amy the dancer. or Amy, the right, you know, what's like what? How do you spend your time? That's the second name, and so I don't know. This would be like how people come to know you, like what's your like what you're generally spending your life on becomes the quality. That's the second name. And the third name, which is what he gives the most space to, which I think to him is probably the most important, is a name that you acquire for yourself. Tony, can you give me something, some liquid or something?
Sure.
I don't care, tea, something. So, no, that'll be great. So the name that you acquire for yourself is connected to the thing in your life that you have to fix and heal. And in this is the classic Ishbitzer's Torah on everybody's got a chisaron, a lack. Like where your lack is, where your wound is, your Saturn point, your Pluto point, whatever you want to call it, your south node, what your it's the thing that you need to work through. It's your karma. So afilu achisaron shenitba bo miyom givalda. It's even the quality that is from the first name. We'll see, like Rachel had a chisaron, right? She was jealous, right? And that's her name is Rachel. She's holding jealousy, but she had to learn how to work with it, right? She had to give Bilhah to, she's like, okay, I can't do it, but maybe if Bilhah, I give my maidservant, then the work will be done. I don't have to work with the jealousy. Thank you, brother.
Sure.
So it's like the name that you acquire is the name that you acquire because of the work on that which is lacking or that which you need to work through or heal.
This is we give this to ourselves,
We acquire it for ourselves.
we acquire it.
Now, I don't know if it's a name. Thanks, bud. It's not clear that it's a name per se, like you have a new name. Like I don't think that the third name might not be a name per se. It might be the other side of the name you originally had. Like if you're named David, you're open to be a lover, but like you might have too much chesed, and so you have to learn how to have more gvura. So that's the fuller aspect of David. Like I'm not sure if this literally means you have a new name, but look at what he says. Ze perush pasuk. If you look at in Proverbs, in Mishlei, it shall be a health to your navel, right? Your navel. Like, is this like primordial chi? Like, that in Taoism, there's like the chi, there are different aspects of your life force. There's life force that you have that can't be added to, but can only be depleted. That is called like navel chi versus the like life force that you enhance, right? There's a whole, in Taoist healing, there's a whole conversation about how you preserve your primordial chi versus the chi or life force that you can amplify each day, or you can strengthen each day. But like there's here in the tabur, meaning your belly button or your navel, here means it's an allegory to like you can heal the thing that you've had since birth, meaning the lack that you were born with. You were, whatever is in your chart or in your parental environment or the place that you were formed, that's still in your hands. So here he combines kind of a deterministic model. You have a birth name, which seems to be fixed. But you also have a name that you could acquire for yourself, which seems to be not fixed, which is nice. Right? The Talmud teaches in Sota that the beginning of your formation is from your navel. And so this is how he understands the verse in Isaiah. This is like a remarkable rendering of like the Christian idea that you are called a sinner from the womb. Original sin, which by the way doesn't mean, original sin is really related to Jesus' birth, but not to each person's birth, although it was later understood that way. Like, okay, so like we're sinners from birth. What does that mean? It doesn't mean like you're a sinner in the sense of a moral valence to it, like you're a sinner because you've done something wrong per se. But all of us are born with blind spots, right? Each of us in our own unique way, which is our original name. But we can fix that, he says, with the name that we acquire for ourselves. Al Kain, therefore, Gadol Mashikonehu La'atzmo. He's therefore the name that you acquire for yourself is the greatest of the three names. Right? The greatest of the three names. Ki milat shem b'chol makom. Because he says, I want to teach you something. The word itself, the name, when we say the word name, your name, it means the shoresh hachayim, the root of life, of your life force. Shekol hanefesh hu medugalbo. That the entire soul, which is on the next page, is, right, it's a feather in your cap. It signifies, right, is exemplified by it, right? Meaning, the feather in your cap or the flag in your cap literally means you're flagged by it, means that it's something that you should be proud of. The soul is exemplified by the name. The name always means the root of your life force that you have acquired for yourself. Right, so you have three names, and we're going to open it up now. Three names, he said. The name that your parents give you, which they have a unique, in Kabbalistic philosophy, you have a unique pipeline towards the soul of that child. And that when you look at that child or you hold the child, you can have a sense of who they are in the world and who they might live into. So there's a tension here between this and usually the understanding of a name is not just that it's descriptive, but it's prescriptive. And that when someone calls you by your Hebrew name in Kabbalah, it's a blessing. Meaning like every time someone calls you by your name, they strengthen the name that you have. Like if someone calls me David, 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 the David in me is now being amplified by their call. It's like a blessing. They're not just calling me as a signal, they're also saying, may you be David, right? May you be David. And so my Davidness is now strengthened by the exchange of oxygen, the breath that comes to life force. It's as if you're calling me to my name the way that God called the original human being to life. That you breathe life into the person. And so that exchange of vapor is a blessing. But he's saying it's also the limits of that, right? Your parents are calling you that name because they know who you are, but they also are limiting you based upon your weakness, right? Because there's a weakness in all things. Then the world calls you by the things that you do. And then in your life you say, okay, how can I get a new name for myself based on how do I fix what's lacking in my name? Right? So again, with Rachel, she had the capacity. So let me give another example. I'll open it up, okay? Yeah, let me just look at all the hands that are up in here in the participants. You can start putting your hands up to speak, and we'll call on you in a second for the first Torah, and in the room too. But let me just say one more thing about Rachel. You know the way Rachel was given the capacity. It's not just that she would have jealousy in her heart and then keep it quiet. Her capacity, that was also a strength of hers. Because what happened in the story of Leah and Rachel, Leah replaces Rachel. And according to the tradition, right, Rachel could have outed the whole thing, but she doesn't, right? Her sister, she was jealous of her sister later on because her sister had children and she wanted children. But when Rachel was, when her father said, I'm going to put Leah in front, instead of you, Rachel also had the quality of being able to be silent, right? And so her silence worked in a number, she could hold a secret, right? She knew how to clamp down on her desire to speak out. But it also had this quality, a valence of jealousy as well. So she was able to overcome that. And right, okay. So it's not completely right, because it then became, if you think about the way it's transgenerational trauma worked, then the children of Joseph, her children, were the ones people were jealous of Joseph. It transferred, right, to Leah, right? Okay, well, that's not for now. Okay, let's talk. Let's go. Let's open it up. Okay, thoughts and feelings on this Torah, and we'll first stay in the room and then we'll go to the Zoom. Yeah, Tony, speak up because you're really far from these speakers.
Thinking of Thoreau, who says near the end of Walden, only that day dawns to which we are awake. Only that quality of being. In order to awake, we need to name it at times.
We need to name the thing, right?
Helps.
Yeah.
The attention.
Oh, it's so good. I want to come back to that in the second Torah, but yeah, go ahead now.
Also, my understanding of the Baal Shem Tov's teaching is there's one central sin, and that's pride.
Hey, sorry for interrupting him. We have mics on both sides here, so if like you want to speak more into the mic, so everyone can hear all beautiful things you have to say, please come forward. Yes,
Thanks, Caroline.
I do my
Tell us
best.
next time. Yeah, great. Just this next time, just tell us you can't hear him, and then he'll move. Yeah, you're near the good.
So I'm not sure sin is the right word here.
According to the Baal Shem Tov, you said that sin.
That every day, every human being needs to work with pride because there's a royal quality that we sense of ourselves. That's enough. That's enough.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. If everybody, I'm gonna direct you. Can you speak to the? I'm gonna come back to the pride thing and explain that to people, but I want you to speak to the names.
So the other thing I was
talking about names. So
the other thing I wanted to say is we talk a lot or a little about how words lead to worlds and worlds lead to word. That there's some kind of wild mystical connection between.
Do you connect to the name Tony that you have?
A little bit. I connect to a lot.
I'm
a little bit of a shapeshifter.
What names do you
Well, my
do you
Hebrew
most
name
connect
is
to?
Abraham.
And do you connect to that?
I do.
In what way?
I consider myself a bit of a
iconoclast.
Well, yes. utter
oppositional.
Let's put it this way: when I was in training, I feel seen and a little obscene.
Seen and obscene.
Yeah.
That's a great. Obscene and obscene.
And not for nothing, when I was in training at Cornell Westchester, one of my wiser and wittier colleagues and mentors, Ginny Sussman, who became head of the hospital later on, said, "You know, we're going to give you the diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder, but I believe you're in the process of overcoming it." I'm still in the process.
Okay, and what about the name that you've acquired that others call you by?
Well, by the way, my full name, given name, is Anthony John Stern, which makes sense given my my father's father married a Shiksa goddess. So I'm partly Catholic. It explains some of my Michigan.
Okay, but what's let's also with the Shiksa thing. Let's be careful with that. It's a very derogatory.
Well, I don't take it.
I know you don't, but I'm just saying.
No,
for me personally, I'm very sensitive.
Sure.
We have people who are Jews and non-Jews in the room, so I know that Jews don't. A lot of us don't use that term any longer, and people sometimes. A woman who's not Jewish might use it for herself, and just attentive to it has a lot of illnesses. But back to the name that you have for yourself, that others have for you. What's the name that people have? What do you think people call you?
Well,
okay, never mind. And okay, great. Okay, great. Yeah, great. I want to come back to the Baal Shem Tov.
Well, Tony, I'll tell you, my friend Jill Stein, my friend Jill Stein has called me over the years Tone.
I love that. It's interesting. Tone.
And she's a musician.
As I come back to the teaching that Tony brought from the Baal Shem Tov. When the Baal Shem Tov died, people leaned in and they could hear him whispering. His last words were from the book of Psalms: God, please not have pride. Al tehu any regel ga'ava. May pride not be my last experience. Save me from the sin, from hubris would be the one. So there was ga'ava, which we might define as the overreach of the self beyond itself to inflate, as that deeply runs from a sense of, on the holy side, that one is one with God, and from the non-holy side, which is one is insignificant, and so one abreacts to it by claiming more significance, right? And so the ego becomes hardened, it feels threatened, and so on.
As in Boonham's great Two Pockets.
Exactly, the two pocket man. So that was a lot of room. We're going to go to the Zoom and come back to the room. I want to just balance room with Zoom. So I can't see, 1 second. Jay, go ahead, Jay.
I was just wondering, an obvious question, whether the great Ukrainian Israeli poet of last century, Zelda, had this in
Zelda.
mind, knew of this in her famous poem, Each of Us Has a Name.
It's so good. Whenever I see that poem, and I see it frequently, it's one of the most oft quoted poems in Jewish circles. I often think the same exact thing, Jay. I think, did she study the Ishbitzer? I have to think that she came across this teaching, if not from the Ishbitzer, from the Kohelet Rabbah teaching, right? Because basically Kohelet Rabbah is where he's sourcing it. That's the primary text, right? And he's using it in this moment with Leah and Rachel, right? So that's his geschäft. And then, yeah, and it's also deeply Jewish. I mean, like, names for Jews are so essential. Like the first thing that the primordial human did was name things, right? Naming things. That everything that was brought to Adam to humanoid was named. So there's an essential core Jewish teaching around the power of a name and its importance and the danger of a name, right? It already is in the book of Genesis with Abraham. Like one of the things that is so weird in the Abraham story is like in chapter 15, like Abraham gets a new name, like, and so does Sarah. And you're thinking, I didn't see that one coming, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to call you Abraham, and you're like, I don't know if I was going there, right? Like, and then he had a bris milah, and he gets a new name. So obviously Zelda is playing off of a deep ontological assertion of the Jewish tradition that names are an expression of our own uniqueness, an expression of our own daemon, our own destiny, who we are. And there's also the deep rabbinic tradition that if you are sick, you get a new name, right? If someone needs a new name to heal. And I remember as a young rabbinical student, I wasn't young, but I was a young rabbinical student, and well, the first time I was a rabbinical student, I was definitely young. My second rabbinical tour of duty was, I was already at that point, I had been a professional. I had already tried to make a living in New York. I mean, my parents must have been, I can't even imagine what they were thinking. As an astrologer, like I had a part-time gig as a professional astrologer. I had worked through the NCGR, the National Council for Geocosmic Research, and I had my certification. I had, studied for 3 or 4 years. And then I came back to rabbinical school, and I came upon a book by a rabbi who tried to understand astrology Kabbalistically in the stories. And so there is a Gemara. The Talmudic sages lived in Babylonia, and they were very influenced by Babylonian, both Zoroastrianism and the emphasis on astrology in Babylonia and other areas. And so the Gemara, the Talmud says in Rosh Hashanah, Mishana Makom, Mishana Mazel, that if you change your place, you change your constellation, which is a clear astrocartography, like the whole thing. And then there's also, if you change your name, you change your mazel, right? And so I remember this book that I read said that, yeah, when you go up to the bima to get a new name, you should now do a new birth chart for that moment when you get a new name. Right now you have multiple charts in your life. And so clearly the tradition has it that a name, right? There's another tradition that says that the letters of the name are the energy source, and that will be the change. Like if you say, you give a person Yosef, then those letters and the meaning of it, there's a lot going on here with names, but back to Jay's point about Zelda, it's clear that in our tradition, a name is an expression of our what someone called your soul print. We might call it, I was talking to somebody this week about dancing. Jody Arnold, Arnold. Yeah. So Jody and I were talking this week. She had just given a speech at Alvin Ailey, and she told me what she wrote. And what she wrote was, dance is for every child. That was her phrase. Dance for every child. And that's her philanthropy, is every child should be able to dance. or should be given the tools to dance. And it became clear to me that you have a dance print, like your fingerprint, because the most spontaneous thing that we do is move in space. Like, it's so unique to us. And the way that somebody moves, there's a language for movement, right? There's even people who put nouns and verbs and kind of made it into a language. So the name for us, we are a people of the names, right? We love names because we think that a name is an expression of who we are, or can be. And there's also kind of name dysmorphia. Like, you can have the wrong name. Like, maybe your parents named you something and it's like, this is not who I am, right? And then what I think the Ishbitzer wanted you to say is, let the name that you are become the name that people call you. Why should people keep calling you a name that's not your name? That's not who you are. I'm thinking, I'm the one formerly known as the Prince. I'm formerly known as, like, the artist, the Weeknd. Like, isn't that great? He called himself the Weeknd. That's who I am. I'm the Weeknd. Okay, fine. I'm Sunday morning. It's fine. You can call me Sunday morning. Right? This is why I think Native Americans also, and the indigenous peoples and their naming structures are also so beautiful. Like, you would name somebody Dances. That brought me to tears with Dances with Wolves. I used to cry so much when I saw that movie because it felt like he was stuck in an old, like, that's the story, right? If people don't know that movie, you should watch it. I mean, like, Kevin Costner's character, he's not that guy. He realizes after he finds his real family, which is this tribe of indigenous, peoples. And they give him a name because he's dancing with a wolf, and that becomes his name. That's who he is. So you might look at David Kurtz, and say, like, fingers dancing on black and white keys, something like that would be like, makes people smile. It's like, what would it be like for someone to call you that in the morning? Like, makes people smile. It's like, wow, that would be nice, right? I'll take that one. Isn't that the Smurfs? Aren't the Smurfs like that? We've just gone from Ishbitzer to Smurfs in one. Okay, we're late on the second Torah. I really want to teach the second Torah, but there's more voices. So how late are we on the second Torah? 10 minutes? Okay, I gave myself some padding. Okay, I don't see if there's anybody else in the Zoom, and then we'll come back to you in the Zoom. But Jeff is here in the room, and then Wendy, Jeff and Wendy. And then Ezra. Huh? Oh, okay, Jeff.
So a few things come to mind. One is the nature versus nurture. So you're given in your DNA. You can't deny you're given a nature in your DNA. So that is the first name in some way. But then, like in Judaism, we call somebody, Peretz ben Yekutiel, like we attach the parent's name because we're acknowledging that what the parents do to you, your environment is also like, it makes you who you are. So not only do you get your DNA, then you get your influence of your parents, that's your second name. And then when you heal the patterns that you're given by your parents, that's the healing, which is really the third name. So it really fits this whole nature versus nurture model in a beautiful way.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then the name that people call you is also, yeah. Does it mean an actual name? Does it mean, like, the pattern of your life? Is the name that people call you only known for most people at their eulogy? Like, isn't, like, writing your own eulogy is a way of trying to figure out what people might be calling you when you're dead? It's like wanted to be a billionaire. That's like it's your epitaph, right? Like, spend time healing, right? It was like, those are the multiple names. Like, the way that you spent your life is like the name that people think of you when they conjure you. Because usually a nominal is almost always a way of getting your attention. Like, nobody calls me by my name for any other purpose other than to grab my attention, right? Like, why do people to address me? Like, usually a name is an address. Just listen. Oh yeah, we lost the. Okay. No, she's there. Okay, there.
Is the salutation like Rabbi or Mr. or Mrs.? Is that part of the?
It's also interesting. Doctor is doctor, or like your occupational name. It's also an interesting thing. It's kind of to me, that feels very much like the thing that people call you in the world. It's in that category of I had nicknames. Like, for example, for many years, in my, I don't,
Share this with your mom.
Here we go, here we go.
Yeah.
Come on.
Later.
Time. When I was, there was a period, when I was 24, when I was 23, I left Chaim Berlin and then spent the next 2 years kind of like resettling myself in New York City. And I worked in a couple of restaurants. But when I was 26, I wound up at a restaurant on the Upper West Side that is no longer there on Columbus 85th Street called Garlic Bob's. I think I've talked about it. Sure, doesn't matter. It's a pizza restaurant. And I was there and I was running with a lot of guys who, I was playing a lot of hockey, ice hockey, whatever. And they just started coming to the restaurant and they would call me Garlic Dave. And that eventually, that became, from Garlic Dave, they started calling me Garlic. And that was it. They just called me Garlic. That was my name for like 4 years. Sure. I haven't heard that. Like, my roommate at that time lives around the corner from where I live now, 101st in Riverdale. So whenever he sees me, he sometimes will call me Garlic, but then he remembers that I'm Rabbi. But like, oh, I'm sorry, Garlic Rabbi, whatever. But my sisters called me Duvi. My parents used to call me Duvi. Like when people in the yeshiva world call me Chaim David, that's my Hebrew name, Chaim David, and I loved it. I loved it when people called me Chaim David. And Reb Zalman used to call me David Laban, beloved David. So like we have names that people call us in that second category that are sometimes a nickname is also a beautiful diminutive or something sweet that brings out. There's something about names also that bring out a quality in us too, right? It also names a relationship. Like my wife calls me, the way that my wife says my name is very different than anybody else saying my name. It's a quality. Like last night also, Orzi said to me, I said something, Orzalman, like that. He said, Abba, you only say that when you're angry at me.
Yes.
Right? Otherwise you call me Orzi. I said, maybe that's true. All right, let's go to the second Torah. This is so rich, right? You can spend a lot of time in this one, but I want you to put it in your back pocket and to think about it. And now we're going to learn a Torah from the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov on the beginning of the Parsha, which I also loved and wanted to share with all of you. Okay? We need some aperitif to cleanse the palate in the first Torah to the second one. Okay. No, I'm good, brother. Thank you. All right. So this one is only in Hebrew. So so if you don't read Hebrew, don't be angry at me. I'm going to go slowly, okay? I see. 9:30. I'll give you 15 minutes. Okay. Only 15 minutes late. Okay. Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. That Jacob left the place called Be'er Sheva, and went to Haran, right? Let me remind you of the series of verses here, okay? He went from Be'er Sheva to Harana, and it says, Vayifga b'makom. He happened upon a place. The word makom here, place. Don't forget that makom also sometimes in rabbinic language, makom is a name for God. So he happens upon a place can also mean something connected to God, which we'll get to in a moment. But we're working on the simple meaning of the story and then its allegorical possibilities. All right, he happens upon a place, right? And what does he do? He goes to sleep there. Kiva hashemesh. The sun had come and he wants to lie down. The sun had gone down on him, so he lies down, goes to sleep. He takes a rock, vayikach even. He takes a rock from the place, vayasta mirashosa, puts it underneath his head, and he begins to have a dream. Vayachalom v'hinei, and behold, sulam mutzav arza. There's a sulam, there's a stairwell, a stairway, a ramp, a ladder, a lot of different understandings. Something is mutzav arza, it's in the ground. It's like solidly in the ground. The rosho magia shemaima, and its head goes up the heavens. V'hinei, and behold, the word v'hinei appears over and over again. And behold, malachei Elohim olim v'yordim bo. There are angels of God that are going up and down on the ladder. V'hinei Adonai nitzav alav. And then Yud He Vav He, God is on the top of the ladder. Behold, it's standing, like standing there. There's God. And God says to him, don't worry. You're going to go down to Haran, but I'm going to take care of you. I'll bring you back to this land. I will not abandon you until I have finished with you what I promised. Vayikatz Yaakov, Mishnah son Jacob woke up. Okay? Let's look at the Degel. Grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, Moshe Chaim Ephraim of Sedilikov, one of two children born to the Baal Shem Tov's daughter Edel or Udal, and he's going to give a teaching from his grandfather. He's one of the main sources for the original teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, whose name was invoked already by Tone. Tone John. Yesh bekan sod gadlus v'katnus. In this teaching, there is a mystery of bigness and smallness. Amazing how we're looking at Leah and Rachel. Leah and Rachel were like, one is gadol, great, and one is small. Here he says there's a mystery of not age, older and younger, but expansion and smallness, contraction. What does he mean? For Hasidic masters, he means big mind, expansive mind, and small mind. What does that mean? It means a mind that is open and transparent to God. Let's call it an altered state that you might have with medicine or with meditation or with movement. It's flow. It means when you're connected, when you're logged on. This is like Urban Dictionary. When you're like when divine reality is fully clear. Nirvana, it's the cessation. It's in the Vedas. Like when you're in the sense of the formlessness of God's presence, it's shimmering. It's what you experience when you go on a mushroom trip. Hopefully, anybody ever done something like that? I hope you have. And you get a taste of a reality not being as solid as it seems, right? It's when the heart's wide open. Lots of different ways to understand it. Katnut, what is katnut? When you feel disconnected, dislocated, alienated, separate, right? God feels distant. That's in Chassidus, that's everything. How we navigate that polarity in our lives between exile and redemption, being in the land versus being out of the land, right? In Chassidus, they managed to talk about the inner world. And they didn't say the outer world doesn't matter. They didn't say, oh, from now on, we're the new Israel. You don't really have to get circumcised. You could just circumcise your heart. That's another sect of Judaism called Christianity. Right? That was Paul. But Chassidim wanted to try to talk about spirituality and not discard the form, but infuse it with meaning and say we have, right, both.
Rabbi, he's seeing all of this in the dream? Is this?
No, I'm just giving you I'm not talking about Jacob now. I'm just telling, in the dream, you'll see. You'll see how he maps it onto the dream. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is all about, he's going to map all of what I just said into the story of Jacob.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, we're coming back. I'm just setting it up. There we go.
Okay.
So here's, in the teachings, Kayadua, B'Shem, as is known in the name of my illustrious grandfather, those acronyms, those letters with the chupchiks just mean my father's father, may his soul rest in Eden, Garden of Eden. He taught that in the verse in Ezekiel in chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel has a vision of these animal angels called chayot, right? And they're running back and forth like lightning. And that becomes a very important teaching for Chassidus. Ki achayot ratzov vashov, for the animals or the angels were running back and forth, running and returning. In Chassidus, the word chayot, which means animals, is chiyut, life force, vitality, or mind. It runs and returns. It ebbs and flows. You go in and out of states of consciousness. Those angels are speaking to the way the mind works and the heart. It opens and closes like an aperture. And the secret of Gadlut and Katnut, he says, it's impossible. It's says it's impossible to stand on one level at all times. It's not a stage. You can't always be in the rapture. You can't always be in the clarity. You can't always. These are obvious teachings for us as humans. We know this, but to see it in his writings, like wow, right? You're always going up and down. You're always going up and down. And the going down, v'hayiridah hu tzorech aliyah. This is another teaching of Hasidus, that the descent is for the sake of the eventual ascent. You can't jump and dunk if you don't go down first. Nobody dunks with straight legs, unless they're 8 feet tall. You can't do it. You want to go high, you got to go low. They go high, we go low, means we go low to go high. Right? You got to go down to go up. And this is a core teaching in Kabbalah, that it begins with God's willingness to become incarnate as a world. Right? There was a yiridah that God had to, as it were, move from it's all me to other than me, which is the world, for there to be once again a return to all me. It's this constant, like we go down to go up. We need the weekend, so that we need Shabbat, which is a way, right, to go up. We need to go back down into the week for 6, and we go back up again to Shabbat, and we go back down again. It's always inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Just there's no way. He says that's the way of it, right? But when this comes back to Tony's point, which I wanted to get to, which is when you kishenosin alev yodea, but when you bring that to mind, and you know and feel, that's the most important one. Umargish zeh shehu bekatnut, and you realize, oh, now I'm in small mind, right? You wake up, you say, oh, that was, I was below the line.
Small mind is actually big mind.
When you realize you're in small mind, it opens. So he says, when you realize that you're in the descent, when you put it on your heart, which means you're sitting on the cushion, I'll just use Buddhist terminology, you're at work, whatever it is, but you're sitting, you're like, I'm in a daydream. And that moment, awareness, by the way, where does that come from? You'll see where it comes from. Like, oh, okay, all right, I was gone, now I'm back. And then you daven to God. You pray to Hashem, right? In the meaning of the word, ubikashte misham es Hashem elokecha umatzasa. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses says to the people that one day you're going to be really far away from God, and there it means literally, in exile, in Uzbekistan, or in Tehran, or even in New York City, and you say, wow, I'm so far from the land of Israel, and we seek out God, God will be available, and God will answer us and bring us home. He says the Baal Shem Tov said that meant both that and allegorically, wherever you are, if you are in that sham, in that place, and realize that you're distant from God, you should call out to God and say, God, I'm in exile, bring me home. Tap your heels 3 times and you'll be home. Whoa, right? Shehu sham, mimakom shehu sham, k'mo amar, right? That is where you are. You're in that place of distance. There you should call out to God from that place of distance. Stop and say, oh, now how does this come back to Jacob? That's what is alluded to in the verse. I'm in line 6 at the end of it. And Jacob left Be'er Sheva. He says the well of 7 means Kishat Sadik Nofel Mi Madregato. When the righteous one, the Bodhisattva, all of us, fall from our level. V'yotzei min ha'nevi'u v'yashchina shenikra bat Sheva. That we are now outside of the flow of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, who is called in the Kabbalah the daughter of 7. Why is the Shekhinah called the daughter of 7? Because in Kabbalah, the last of the Sfirot that is in this world, right? Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. This world is called the Shekhinah. Shabbos is called the Shekhinah. She's the 7th day. The daughter of 7 is the experience of the divine presence that is called, allegorically, the daughter of 7. So it says when Jacob leaves the well of 7 is an allegory, he left the Shekhinah. The well of 7 means he's now not in the flow of divine presence. And he's on the way to a smaller place called Harana, right? Harana is a smaller place. Shenofel katnut. And he feels, when he feels that, Jacob feels it, what does he do? Vayifka b'makom. Hainu shu mitpalel al ze lehamakom baruch hu. He calls out to Makom. He prays to Makom. Remember, the name Makom is not just place, but it's also God. So now he's reading the story as, which could be simply, he happened upon a place as, I'm God, I'm no longer in Be'er Sheva, in the place of divine presence, in the Shechina. So I got to pray to you, God. I'm going to stop and pray, please, God. God, I'm not there. I'm not in that. I feel small again. I feel it. I feel myself becoming angry. I feel myself becoming small. You get that moment of awareness and you stop. And if you're a Buddhist, you stop and you ground yourself. You follow your breath. Maybe you put your hand on your heart. You step back and you say, "Wow." Where Jew might say, all those things are true, but you might also say, "God, it's coming on again. Can you help me? I'm not feeling connected to you. Can you help me?" Right? So he says, "Vayikach mi'avnei hamakom." He takes from the stones of the place, Hainu mimakom shusham kanal, ubikashta misham. Right? He says, you take from the stones of the place, meaning from the place that you're in, you find words. He doesn't say it, but words to pray. Right? Vaya chalom, and then he has a dream, and there's a ladder going up. V'sulam mutzav arza v'rosh magia shamayim hainu sheyirida shehu mutzav arza usulam lalos achar kach l'madrega yoser gedola kayadua. Says that ladder that is in the ground, that very grounded quality, meaning you're now small, you're in the ground like you're like a seed, you're gonna bloom. You realize that even your small place now is a ladder upon which you will now climb. Like the very place that you are can become a doorway, a portal to something. Right? That experience of small mind and small heart might itself be a ladder for your growth. Right? And you realize, and one second, last thing here, and then we're going to open it up. Open it up, because the rest of it is not, I can stop sharing in a second. That the angels going up and down the ladder are a reminder that there has never been any bodhisattva, any righteous person, any saint, anyone in the world that didn't experience going up and down. That's the way of the human condition. But the angels here are not angels. They're every human who's ever been in form, who has ever achieved any excellence, whether it's musical excellence, political savvy, parental excellence. Human excellence is predicated on descents that lead to ascents. Babe Ruth struck out way more times than he hit the ball. And as you're sitting there, you're going, wow, I can't believe, you can stop the share here for a second, for now, Caroline. There's a letter from the Pachad Yitzhak Kuttner sent a letter to one of his students at Chaim Berlin, where the student wrote to him and said, how is it that we read these books about these saints like the Chavetz Chaim, Rav Yisrael Meir Kagan, who wrote a whole book about living a gossip-free life and no lashon hara, and he writes a whole book on it, 4 books on it, and he's so like, how can we, like, these are not people that we can emulate. And so the Rav Hutner wrote back and said, nobody writes about, what you don't see is how many times he fell, because nobody writes about that in the sacred tradition. By the way, it's a good question why they don't. Like, maybe we'd be better off, because the Bible is maybe a better source of that. How often biblical characters fall, and the best one, which is why he's my favorite, is Jacob, because Jacob is so not a perfect character by any stretch of the imagination. Yosef also. Avram isn't. Sarah isn't. So there's something about the Jacob dream here is about every human being's daily struggle with the slings and arrows of life, that we experience radical shifts of clarity to obfuscation, from like, oh, we see it, now we don't. There it is, and there, and then it's gone. And Jacob now becomes an allegory of the prayer life. Like the most important moment of prayer is the moment when you realize that you're out of prayer mind, and then bring yourself back. And then you remind yourself and give yourself strength and say, those angels go up and down the ladder. There's never been a great musician that didn't feel that they had a creative block. There's never been a marriage that didn't struggle. Never. There's never been a synagogue that didn't go in and out of being, in nostalgia for where it once was, and now here we are. Where do we go forward? Like, it's just the way of it, says the Degel. And his own grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, said that exile is part of the human condition, and that the place of exile can become a place of radical possibility. Is a teaching that, like, that's Hasidus. Like, where you are is where you're meant to be, and it's there that you're supposed to try to lift up the world that's there and yourself from that place. Okay, how much time are we doing? I'm gonna look up at the time. Okay, we have 12 minutes. Okay, we'll start with the Zoom because they were last time. We'll come back into the room. So Zoomers, Adel and Ordell, and then
I'll
else
also say,
wants to put
Sherwood wanted to speak, but she didn't know how to raise her hand, so yeah, she would like to speak eventually. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so those two people are up first. Go ahead.
Yes, so good Shabbos, everyone. And
Shabbos.
I am, my original name is Chaya Edel. I'm also legally known as Adele. My endearing name is 80. And in Jamaica, they call me Purple Rain. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for this inspiring and very helpful teaching about how to manage ruts of a shuv, going up and down the ladder, being small mind, big mind. And what comes up for me is the universal symbol for healing is the lotus, which grows out of the mud. So that's a very inspiring image to hold for me and all of us potentially when we are in the basement. The other thing I wanted to mention is looking at the Hebrew text, Hachisaron, reminded me of the Yiddish word chasurn, which I grew up with. So now I know where it comes from. The Hebrew.
Nice.
Thank you.
Another thing that we said last night, which thank you, Adel, and Purple Rain.
Oh, also, I wanted to say the Baal Shem Tov. I'm related to the Baal Shem Tov because of Adel.
That we know. So I just want to remember that last night we talked about how the stone that Yaakov uses for a pillow becomes the altar, which is a similar image, like the stone, which is the hard thing, the thing that's so dense, right? Certainly uncomfortable, becomes the very thing that he then lifts up and becomes the holy reminder.
Her name means gentle stone.
And Edelstein means gentle stone, exactly. Wow. Very good. No, Edelstein would be, yeah, but okay, yeah.
It's
Stern means Edel. Yeah.
Star.
Evan Ma'asu Habonim.
Yeah, exactly. The stone that was, yeah, exactly. So who's the second person? I don't remember, Caroline.
Miriam wanted to speak. The name's under Sherwood. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Hi. My mom and I are here. We buried my father this week, and his name was Sherwood, but he actually was born David Lee, and he always said his life would have been different if they'd kept David Lee, but they changed it. I don't know what, Mom, was it 10 days in? Because there was a relative complained that there was another relative, a distant relative, so he couldn't be David. he always wanted to be David. And so when we always blessed him for healing, it was, he actually had a series of names. He was David Lee, Sherwood, Sonny Boy, they called him Sonny Boy, Shimon, Shmerel Shlemi. There's more. There's more. And I also called him Bear. He looked like a bear. And at his funeral, they got his name wrong. We said it was Shmerel Shlemi, so I called out that name right at the grave. So there was always a thing with names for my dad, and also my dad. I'm really reeling. I'm in so much pain, but
Oh,
talk today. My father always said also we have to go, down to go up. We have to, we won't know good unless we know bad. He talked about that as well. And I have things with my name. My mother also was given a different name, and then it was changed days later. So there was always a name thing here. The last thing I just want to say with names was that I met a woman from West Africa. She wrote a book, and I can't remember her name right now. And in her tribe, she said that when the mother's pregnant, I don't know if it's the mother or more the shaman that asks the baby what their name is, because you have to know the baby's name. What's their name is going to be this. And when you call them by their name, you're calling them by their sole purpose. And then they also then give to the tribe. And then they can be who they are fully. And I always love that. I heard that so many years ago that just was so beautiful. And this it resonates so much with that. Um, yeah. And yeah, I hope it's okay that I spoke.
oh yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. To lift up your father's name as a bracha, as a blessing, and may his memory be a blessing for you and your family. I think it's a powerful framing that you brought. The last piece, I mean, everything you said, but the last piece also, part of the calling um, people to their name. That's a gift, and it's brought down in a number of places that when you want to if you want to wake somebody up, the most powerful way to wake them up is to call them by their name. Like if you try to wake somebody up and you just keep, moving them and saying, wake up, but if you just say their name, you can wake them up. And it's something about that that's very true. And that when we meet people who know us by our true name or true names, Thich Nhat Hanh has a beautiful poem about call me by my true names, which is very powerful also, very similar idea.
I
Thank you
found,
so much.
yeah,
Yeah, and then we're going to,
the day he died, this week, he was, I always told him sort of, I saw it also as a shamanic journey because he was sort of in and out of sometimes different realms. But he asked me, he said his middle name. And it's like he knew and he didn't know, and I told him.
yeah.
And yeah, he, yeah.
I know that there are people in our shul who don't have a Hebrew name also, by the way. I know that Amy took on a Hebrew name. Oh, you didn't take one on yet? We talked about it.
Yeah.
So something to think about if you don't have a Hebrew name, think about it, think about having a naming ceremony. It'd be a nice thing to do. Ezra.
I think that like as a trans person specifically, these two kind of stories or lessons really interact very beautifully. So last night I was at a minyan specifically for trans Jews, most of which were previously in the British communities that have no longer been welcomed. And we were actually talking about this aspect last night about how we have chosen our own names and we have chosen our own spaces. Because when someone uses the wrong name, it feels very much like an act of violence. And especially with the holidays, you go home and you're brought down that ladder and you have to kind of fight to survive the moment. And then when we come back into these queer spaces or Jewish spaces, especially as like a trans Jew, you're kind of the scapegoat of this entire election, right? And so being able to kind of lift up someone's name using what they have chosen to be their name is such an incredible act of lifting up the world around you and allowing us to, like last night, we like had beautiful niggins and we were creating beautiful Torah specifically because we had created that space and we had allowed ourselves to kind of claim that moment. So yeah, I think that the importance of allowing someone else to claim their name and using that for them lifts people up in a more beautiful way.
Amen. Amen. I think it's a very powerful thing to be able to have your own name. And the Ishbitzer is a great source for this, right? And